Introduction to Server 2008, which is about the same as the introduction to Server 2008 that we had the last time, which is about the same as the introduction to Server 2008 that we've had before. So I will try to speed through these things, discuss client servers, network models, and network models is the big thing. Differentiate among the additions of Server 2008, and I'm going to leave that mostly to you. Identify the hardware requirements, been there, done that. You know how to do those things. New technologies, I think I took a lot of that out. The new roles and features, we've done roles and features in the last class. You'll do roles and features again in this class. The roles that we're going to configure are the infrastructure roles, the things that you would do to manage your network. Navigate the Server 2008 interface, been there, done that. They double up, and on their tests they double up on a lot of stuff. The interface, well, obviously you got to be able to navigate the server interface to be able to do these things. So navigate it, you should know how to do that by now. Quick review here, client servers, Windows network models, the work group and the domain are the two networking models. The work group, each individual machine has its own authentication database. Centralized Active Directory, a centralized authentication database. They do make a good point on the 10, and I still say that the reason that they do 10 is because you can have 10 connections to a client server. But if you had 10 computers that you were sharing resources on with 10 users in a small network, you're up to like 100 accounts. If you have a shared authentication server, you're up to like 10 accounts. The other thing that you might want to do if you didn't want to share them, actually one of the things that I personally would do in one of these networks is to make a centralized workstation that people got their resources from. Now, one of the things that does happen there is once you get to 10, nobody else can connect until somebody disconnects. And if somebody's logged on to the machine at the console, you get all the way up to 9 because you can have 10 total connections to the workstation. The other way, obviously, is to buy the server software. May not want to go to that expense. But in a really small office, under 10, you can take a workstation and make it serve as a server because you have the server service that runs on these things. If you look at the services, the server service runs on workstations, which allows you to share resources. So those things are available. Single work group or a domain, join a domain, and the types of servers we can have, domain controllers, standalone servers, standalone servers in a work group. And then member servers. Member servers are members of a domain. They join a domain like you'll do. I think it's in Chapter 2. You can join a domain so that you can install the WDS again. Domain model with Active Directory, the domain, Active Directory, domain services, you've done that. Did all of you each time go into the roles and add the domain services? Honest to goodness, you're supposed to do it that way. So if you get asked a test question, that's the way you do it. But if you just go type DC promo, it'll add those for you. I don't know if it's long. I've tried to guesstimate whether it's longer or shorter or the same, and I can't really tell that there's any difference. But you don't have to go in and add the binaries first. And when you did DC promo, the first thing it said was checking to see if the binaries are there, right? That's what you do when you go in and add that role. If you haven't added that role, DC promo will add it for you. So domain controllers, host domain security database, domain controllers, those things that have the LDAP database that contains all the authentication information that we use. And that's the primary purpose of a domain controller, isn't it? I mean, what does it really do? It says, oh yeah, you're who you claim to be. And it issues you a ticket to get to the resources that you've been given access to, the domain resources that you've been given access to. DNS, and honest to goodness, you'll get sick of me saying DNS. DNS is a big deal in Active Directory. DNS is a big deal in Active Directory until you try to put together a large structure, and you're probably not going to do that. Actually, I think that the bachelor students will, the associates won't. Until you put together a large structure or create trusts between two forests or something like that, you don't understand what DNS can actually do to you. DNS, the way that the Windows DNS works, is a really big deal, because if it isn't configured correctly, all this other fancy stuff that we have in Active Directory just will not work, can't work. Domain model, group policies, we talked about. Forest. A forest is a way that we can combine domains. All of the structures within a forest have these transitive trusts. So if we create a forest and we have maybe even two domains, so let's have a SKYLINE.edu domain and an ecpitech.edu domain. If they're in the same forest, different domains, different structures, they still trust each other. And the only thing a trust really does is says that if Jason's in the SKYLINE.edu domain and Patrick's in the ecpitech.edu domain, then as the administrator, Jason can give Patrick the authorization to use resources, to print on a printer, to get to a file, something like that. It doesn't give you anything special. What it does is gives you the ability to share resources with that other user. That comes in handy, I think, when companies combine and they already have their existing structures. Instead of trying to rebuild the world, you can create a trust and allow those things to happen. But the transitive trust happens automatically to all of the domains that are within a forest. And the forests have trees. The trees would be the domain structures. The additions, the general additions, enterprise data center standard, designed for special purpose server, the web server, and the high efficiency server, the HPC server, web server is still there. When you do your installs, please use Enterprise for both of them. Use Enterprise for the full, the one with the GUI, and use Enterprise for the core server. And the core server I'm going to have you do with a PXE, so that we talk about these things and kind of demonstrate them, but you don't really use them to see what they are. What is a PXE install? You're just going to start it, it's going to roll around, and hopefully it's going to find the DHCP server. It did for me, and it did for me this morning. It got really weird for a while because I put a second NIC in, and then I took the second NIC out because it kept looking in the wrong place for the DHCP server. Finds that. When it asks you to hit F12, be sure you've clicked in there. It doesn't wait a long time for you to hit F12, and F12 is the key to start it up. When you get done doing all this stuff, it's eventually going to ask you for a password, and the user is going to be administrator, and the password is going to be capital P, password 1, in order to do that. This is just a list of the features that are in each of the editions, and this is in the book whenever we get the books in these things. The standard edition, we'll go through these. We talked about these things. You can read about them. Standard edition, the big deal between standard and enterprise is the amount of memory that the enterprise will manage, as well as failover clustering if you need failover clustering. Active Directory Federation Services is something that is added in enterprise. What that does is allows you to use Active Directory to manage access to resources via a web interface. That's to let somebody from another company into your company. You have to establish a trust, Federation Services trust with them. The number of virtual machines, and this says installation of up to 4 virtual machines on each physical host without buying another license. It doesn't mean that you can't put 5 on it, because we have obviously more than that running on our server back here. They have to be licensed if you're going to run them. But remember that if you just want to learn how to use it, you can get up to 180 days, and that's what I love these books. They give you the CD, it's up to 180 days. Well, anything that you download is up to 180 days, isn't it, without a license? So you can do those things. Hot add memory is available in the server, and the hot add memory, just like the hot add or the disks, the hardware has to support that. The software supports it if the hardware does. I think it would scare me to open up a server while it's still running and pop in a DIM, unless it's configured to do that. How many licenses for virtuals? The ones that, the infrastructure machines that we use that stay in place are licensed, because they have to be licensed. The ones that we're using in a classroom we're not licensing because we're not using them more than 180 days. We're using the demo license, the trial license, whatever you want to call it, license. The ones that I use permanently, I do license because I have some of them that I use as base machines. Those get licensed. But when you install your machine from the base machine, it doesn't take the license along with it, typically. And I guess that they would figure that one out. Otherwise, people would buy one license and have 300 machines running on it. I certainly would, wouldn't you? No, I wouldn't. Because you get caught, you get in big trouble. The data center, 32 processors. And remember, when Microsoft license, they don't license based on cores. They license based on processors. And this thing is based on processors, the data center. Hot add and replace the processors. This is a little bit more than memory. You can do memory. I mean, in each of the additions has the capabilities of the one before it. What we've listed in these slides are just the additions to those capabilities. The web server, kind of a basic, server roles not available, DHCP, DNS file server, doesn't require client access licenses. Licensing in Microsoft is kind of a strange world. You have to have a license to install the server. That's the server license. Then you have to have client access licenses to connect to the server. You can add CALs and you can install these things in a per user or per seat is what they call. What you really want to do is on a per user because that means that each user has a license. But for instance, if I have 40 users and 20 of them work days and 20 of them work nights, I only need 20 licenses because I only have 20 people connected at the time. And that's the default install for licenses. If I change it and I have 40 computers and I do not a per seat license, then I got to have 40 licenses. I have to have one for each of those devices. Different ways to do that. The high performance computing, thousands of processing cores because it's built on the Server 2008 64-bit architecture model, 32-bit, 64-bit. Big difference. Speed, obviously, because of the number of channels that we're using to talk to the processor. The other one is memory management, the amount of memory that you can manage in each of these things. Approved installation process, minimal user input. And this one is kind of handy because it doesn't really ask you for most of the questions until you get to the end, does it? And you don't have to have a license to install it. If you remember back to Windows XP, when it got up to the license, if you didn't put in a valid key code, you can go any further. This one you can install without a valid key code and then go put it back later. And you can do the SLMGR-rearm to extend it up to 180 days. The network regional settings and all that other stuff is after you get done with it so that you can configure it, and you'll need to configure your machines, and I think I give you some basic instructions on that. Virtualization, the preferred method of virtualization is Hyper-V. We're using virtual machines, and you can't run Hyper-V on a virtual machine. You can't run virtualization in a virtual machine. Hyper-V is different than what we're using. We're using Server 2005 R2 that runs on top of the operating system. Virtual PC, which you can download for free if you want to run virtual machines at home. Or if you want to run VMware, the VMware server, the VMware player. Those all run on top of the operating system or in the operating system. They're applications. Hyper-V is a thin layer that is between the operating system and the hardware. It is more efficient. And for your infrastructure machines, the things that you're actually using in production, Hyper-V is probably what you want to do. I started one of Microsoft's virtualization courses, and they said for training, what we're doing is really what you should do because it gives you the ability to reach out further so that when you didn't get your labs done, you can finish them up on a Thursday or whatever else. Couldn't really do that with Hyper-V unless you created probably a VPN to go into some place and then go through a remote desktop to manage your servers there. There are ways around it, but I think what we're doing with the Server 2005 R2 virtualization for the numbers that we're using works out pretty well. We're not really worried about efficiency. We've not got any big database servers. We've not got any real productivity going on those things. The infrastructure servers that we use here, in fact, do run in Hyper-V. The domain controllers, we use domain controllers. Our domain controllers are virtualized. They run in Hyper-V. The WSUS server is virtualized. It runs in Hyper-V. The antivirus centralized management is a virtualized server. It runs in Hyper-V. So we have tried to virtualize along the way. We kind of got stopped in some areas what we can actually add, what we actually have added to it. We get into some issues like some of the testing company software say no, they got to run on physical devices, separate physical devices. Prometric not only has to have a separate physical device, it has to have a separate Active Directory domain. So you're going to run into those things. Can you virtualize everything? No. Does it help? Yep. Fewer resources, fewer physical resources, less cooling, less electricity, lots of different advantages to doing that. And people still think that virtualization, some people still think that virtualization is a simulator. It's not a simulator. You're running a machine. The only thing you're doing is sharing the physical resources of that machine with multiples. The server core stripped down version, and again, the labs in the book call for some server core, so I want you to install and see how to manage server core. The basic instructions will do some basic configurations on server core, give you a better idea of what it is and what you have to do to configure it. The thing to remember about server core is once you get the roles installed, you can manage the roles remotely using the devices. Like DHCP, you can go in and I think there's an option to add a server. Once you get the DHCP service running, add the service on your GUI interface, your workstation, wherever you're managing from, and you don't have to use the command line for everything, but you do need to be able to get around in the command line for some things like, putting an IP address on it, because when you get there, it's like, okay, now what? You've got a command prompt. That's it. If you want to add a role, you have to add the role with a command prompt. The one that I think is the more difficult to do, you can make it a domain controller, but there's no GUI, so you can't answer the questions. You have to install it with an answer file. If you will, the next time you do an Active Directory install, as you go through it, one of the last steps that you have is you verify all the information. There's an export button there. You can export all your answers to a text file. Then you can go back and modify that text file for whatever you want your server core to be and use that as the answer file to install it. It's not, you don't have to go and actually write all the stuff. You can export it and modify it. One thing that will happen to you when it exports, it does not export the password. You have to go in and put the passwords in because you have to have that Active Directory recovery mode password. And I know you set the administrator's password when you get done. And when you do the core install of the PXE, it's going to give you a server name and ask you to log in administrator. Just log in with the blank, and it says you got to change the password. Unlike when you do the full install, when it boots up, the first thing it says is you have to change the password. The first thing this other one asks you to do is log in. Just put the username administrator and hit the enter key with a blank password, and it'll say got to change the password. So the server core can be installed in the full version. We have the attack surfaces less. Standard or enterprise and data center editions are available. When you do your install, go ahead and use the enterprise. Enterprise, to me, is the one that you probably want to use in most circumstances. Well, at Blu-ray's 2003, he put in a bunch of standard servers. That's fine because standard servers cost a little bit less. Problem is, wanted to now expand memory. Well, golly, 4 gig limitation on a standard server, so it couldn't add memory to the server. We needed to add memory to the servers because we needed to have more memory in the Citrix farm. Group policy preferences. This is something that is new. You've done group policy and you've seen the preferences there. Group policies themselves, when you send the group policy, they're enforced. That means that you can't change the stuff. The preferences send the information. They're applied, but they're not enforced, which means that they're applied, but the user can then change them. If we sent a preference for a background, we went through that background thing. Preference for a background, it would set that background, but then the user would be able to change the background or whatever the preferences are there. The group policies themselves are enforced. They're not changeable. This is the roles for each of these, and again, this is a table that'll be in the book. You can look through those things. The roles, certificate services, which we won't talk a lot about. We'll get to that a little bit later on. Certificate services, the ability to issue certificates that are trusted within the domain. You can make a certificate server on any Windows server, but they're not trusted. The user can trust those certificates, but by default they're not. Active Directory domain services, federation services, lightweight directory services, and rights management. And I think we mentioned those things at least in the last class, and they go through a brief discussion in Chapter 1 for those things. Network roles, DHCP, DNS, two of the things that we're really going to focus on here. Network policy and access services, another one that we'll do. I think that one's in week 4, and then the file services we're in week 3. Roles that can be installed in the server, terminal services, fax services, print file, Hyper-V, UDDI, the compatibility with Linux, web server, IIS, and the Windows deployment services are all there. Terminal services, to me, can be a big deal. What terminal services allows you to do is centrally manage your applications, which means that users are running the applications on the servers, which would then allow us to go to thin clients instead of having desktops everywhere that has the applications installed on the desktop. We install the application on the server. You connect from a thin client using the terminal services capability, and you only have to maintain one set of applications. Problem is, if you lose a server, you've lost everything. You notice we've kind of gone full circle? Originally, everything was on a mainframe. And that, by the way, is where virtual machines started. They ran virtual machines inside the mainframes. And then we went to distributed computing. That was the way to go. Everybody had their own desktop. Now we're kind of going back to centralizing a lot of things. So what is available, and they call, and changes, what they call this now is virtual applications, because they're not actually really there. So the summary, we've done the additions. You've looked at the additions before, what's available in them. So 32-bit, 64-bit hardware architectures, and I think if you can run 64-bit, if you have 64-bit hardware, that's what you should run. Gives you a whole lot more ability to manage, to have the resources. It's going to be faster because you have more communications channel, like twice as many communications channels with the devices themselves. Server Manager you've looked at, you've used, you're going to use again. It says it has a feel similar to Windows Vista, has a feel similar to Windows 7, has a feel similar to Windows Server 2008. I don't know that to me the feel has really changed all that dramatically. Let's take a pause here and then we'll do the other one. Okay, installing should be okay, nothing really dramatic. You've installed before, install again, just so you see the processes multiple times. How many times do you install a server? Not really all that often. But the ways I want you to install, the first one, the full install, I want you to go ahead and mount the DVD. You can use the DVD, install the enterprise. For the core, I want you to use a PXE install. and that should work. I've got one. We'll check here at the break and see if it's still going. The PXE install ain't going to be fast. We're going to warn you. I warn you about that up front. It's not going to be fast. When everybody's installing, none of them are going to be all that fast until they get done, because the disk, if you remember, the disk capability is the lowest percentage of utilization of efficiency that you get with virtualization. Improvements in the technologies: prepare and install the server core version of Windows Server 2008. And the core version, the install is not really any different than any of the other ones. It's what happens after it gets installed that is different. Install the core version. Configure the full and core version of the Server 2008 and the 2008 core. The improvements are modularization and the WIM, the XML for the answer files. I think I have you install the WAIK again. That's where you would do the answer files. And if you would go ahead and put in one of the versions and take a look at that, I'm not going to have you create an answer file, because they go on and on and on and on and on. And even the book says that creating the answer file is not as simple as it used to be. It used to be a pretty straightforward thing. Now it just goes on and on and on. I would like for you to see how much is there. You have to get the image from the DVD. It has to have a sources folder. You can't, after you do WDS, you can't use one of those images. You have to use the one right off of the DVD to make it, because you have to have the sources folder. You could copy the whole thing onto the hard drive and do it that way. What modularization means, it's kind of like what we have in a Windows storage server. It's called single instance storage, which means that if we have it in more than one place, we only actually have one physical storage. And what the modularization does is have an area where each of the versions have common files. That's what we're looking at with these things. The 2008 improvements, the Windows deployment services, which was available in Server 2003 Service Pack 3. Multicast, and the PXE that I've got set up, I set up as a multicast environment, which means that it's sending it out to everybody that's connected to it. If Taylor starts first and then 15 minutes later Trevor starts, Trevor will pick up where the multicast is, and then when it repeats, he'll get the rest of the install files. So you don't create an individual session with every, to do a whole distribution with every single user that connects to the server. The multicast does make it a little bit more efficient. The Trivial File Transfer Protocol, TFTP, is the protocol that's used to transfer the information. And for those of you who have done the installs, the remote installs with Linux, it's looking for a TFTP server. It's always looking for a TFTP server. TFTP is FTP and UDP. So FTP uses TCP as the transport protocol. TFTP uses UDP. So we don't have to have the, yeah, I got it. You don't have to have any acknowledgments. Deployment services used to manage the imaging process on a network. And the imaging, and we talked about imaging in Windows 7 cores, the ImageX, they go through some ImageX information here. Anytime you do any of these new Microsoft certifications, you need to be familiar with ImageX. And ImageX just allows you to create an image, and we'll go through Sysprep and all of those things. The multicast, the multiple computers, the TFTP. The Systems Image Manager is part of the WAIK, the Windows Automated Installation Kit, which, again, I think I asked you to install. The DVD is in the DVD folder, so you'll be able to mount it. Don't go try to download it. It's a big download. It's like 1.5 gigs or 2 gig or something like that. The ISO is available there for you to mount it. Access to all the configurable settings in Windows Server 2008. And again, that's a big list. The only reason I really want you to go through that is not to try to make an unattended.xml answer file. Eventually you may need to do that, but see all of the things that are available to go in that XML file. And remember, they said in the last class that they had added 700 items to the policies. And what we're doing with these answer files, obviously, we're answering the questions as we go through here. This is the way it's going to show up. Select a distribution share, select a Windows image or catalog file, and the Windows image does need to be off of the DVD or the ISO mounted. And then if you click on it, you're going to, down here, you're going to get all of the possibilities that you can configure. And again, I want you to kind of get a sense for what's there. It just goes on and on and on and on and on. Nice picture of an XML file, OOBE, out-of-box experience, offline servicing, whatever we're going to do with the image. Offline servicing means that we can do something with the image. ImageX allows you to create the images, if you recall, to distribute the images, and you can also mount and change the images with ImageX. There are other things that you can do that with. I think the piece of software that I personally think is the easiest to mount images and to mount virtual hard drives and to do things with them is a piece of open source software called Gizmo. But you can install it, reboot your machine, you can mount ISOs, you can mount virtual hard drives, make changes to them, and then unmount them. Command line tool used to capture, modify, and apply file-based disk images for rapid deployment. If we had a server that we wanted to send to everywhere, or a desktop, and I think a desktop probably a little more practical in that we could install our standard, our gold standard machine, put all the applications on it that we wanted, run Sysprep, and you do need to run Sysprep. When you run Sysprep, you need to generalize. I did a couple of experiments to see, because generalize actually strips out the SID. I tried that because later on, when we're going to do Active Directory has this one little thing. When you make it a child domain, if they're all from the same base machine, they all got the same SID, and they see each other and says, oh, it's already here, you want me to fix it? And it just goes around in a loop. But until I did the generalize, it didn't strip out the SID. OOBE is one of the options, out-of-box experience. The other one is audit, the audit option. So we can capture the entire disk partition or a specific folder with ImageX. With Sysprep, ImageX, use ImageX to create an image, a WIM image of the machine that we created, and then we can either store that in a WDS server, or we could put it on a DVD, make it a bootable DVD, and move it around and install that machine with all of the applications already on it on our workstations. And when it started up, we'd get a mini install, you'd name it and do all that, do all of the basic things in it. Windows recovery environment, we looked at a little bit, I think. I looked at it with Chris's anyway. Windows recovery environment, you can make a WinPE DVD for the recovery environment, or you can just boot off of the install media, and you can go into Repair My Computer, get you into the WinPE. Options there are to recover it. You can do the memory test. You can recover it using an existing backup. It means you would have had to make that image, or you can go into the command prompt, and the command prompt has some commands, mostly looking at the disks, the check disks, system file check, those kinds of things to see if we have issues with the disk system. Diagnostic solution for building your own recovery systems, you can do those things. Sysprep prepares for the installation of imaging. You need to use Sysprep on the Windows 7, the Windows 2008 server, and those things. New SID, which was an app that some clever guy built and made available for free, will reset the security ID in an XP machine and in a Server 2003 machine. It doesn't work on Server 2008. The only way to get rid of that SID, to get rid of that specific information in these machines, is to run Sysprep. The reason I bring it up, I've had people come back a couple times, and one of them said, hey, we've been imaging our XP machines. Problem is we got a problem because they all think they're the same machine because they all had the same SID. When they did the image, they forgot to run Sysprep. Now we have all those machines. What can we do? Well, you could go run Sysprep on all the machines, or with the XPs and before the 2003 servers, there's an application called New SID that will actually reset that for you. So that, but you can't do it on the new ones. Removes the computer-specific information that should not be transferred to the new image. The SID being the big one here because the SID is used in Active Directory, and the presumption is that mostly we're going to move these machines to an Active Directory environment. The generalization and unique characteristics of installation before creating an image. And when I tried this for the Active Directory install until I ran the generalization, I don't think it actually removed the security ID because until I ran the generalization, it said that the domain that I was trying to install as a child domain already existed because that SID already existed. The out-of-box experience removes all the SID's unique characteristics and applications of an operating system. Audit mode allows you to apply additional application and driver modifications to a specific image. So the two ways, out-of-box experience and the audit mode, when you use Sysprep, and you can run Sysprep from the command line or from the GUI, either one. But you do have to go to the location in the Windows folder because it's not in the path. If you just type Sysprep at the combination search run line, it's going to tell you that, I think it's going to tell you can't find it. You have to go to that location. Installation types, been there, done there, right? Migration, upgrade. We can upgrade from Windows Server 2003 to Windows Server 2008. Migrate, we talked about Windows 7. You cannot upgrade from XP to Windows 7. Attended installation, so when we sit there and answer the questions, although there are fewer questions in these, and the unattended installation is we create an answer file so that the questions get answered as they're asked along the way. The answer file was unattend.xml. What the systems look for, and I think it was more specific in Windows XP. You put the Windows XP CD in and you started it up. If you had a floppy drive, one of the first things that happened, I won't say the first thing, but one of the things that happened at least during the install was it looked at the floppy drive. It was looking for that unattend file. These systems will look at all of your removable media for an answer file, and that also includes the CD/DVD. We had a guy who was really clever that made an answer file and put it on the Windows XP CD, so you could put it in, start it up, and it would do the whole install with the answer file because the answer file was on the CD. It looks on all the removable media, USB drive, floppy if you have it, CD, DVD. So it's looking for that unattend.xml. If it finds it, it'll use that to answer the questions. If it doesn't find it, it'll keep going and ask you to answer the questions. Complete installation of the operating system, cleaner migrate. The clean install obviously does migrate. What we do when we migrate is we do a fresh install and we migrate the user configurations to the new machine. Upgrade Server 2008 from Server 2003, and this should be a straightforward upgrade. I say should be a straightforward upgrade because been there, done that, and it wasn't so straightforward. One of the things that happened is way back when there was an update on Windows Server 2003 that installed PowerShell. Can't upgrade a Server 2003 server with PowerShell installed on it. You have to take it off. The server that I was doing had some stuff from some Microsoft applications, from front page something or other that was installed, had to be taken off. So you just got to go through it and see what it will work with and what it won't work with. But you should be able to upgrade your 2003 servers to a 2008 server. But it may not be just a matter of saying click, click, yes, okay, I'm going to come back. you may have to do some modifications to the 2003 server in order to do that. The types of installations, the CD, DVD, USB boot installation, and the USB boot installation works really well. There is a piece of software that Microsoft has made that allows you to just stick your USB drive in and pick the ISO and say, hey, make this bootable. And the one I'm holding up here is a bootable for the thin PC that we're trying to put on some of the machines that don't have the hardware to run a full version of Windows 7. So Windows 7 thin PC. Put it in, boot it, let it go. It doesn't have an answer file, so you have to answer the questions as you go through the answer. But you can make them bootable. CD, if you do CDs, it'll split the file because you've seen from the DVDs that it ain't going to fit on a CD. It splits the CDs up into 1, 2, 3, however many you need, so you have to feed the CDs to the system. DVD, bootable DVD. And this application will make a bootable DVD or a bootable flash drive. It's kind of handy because you don't have to go back and try to put the boot partition on. It does all of that for you. Network distribution is share. We create a share on our server and boot with a WinPE CD, which would then have, hopefully at least, the driver for the NIC driver in there so that we can now connect to the share and run it from the share. The share is going to make it slower. Network distribution is going to be slower as we do those things. Image-based require you to create the customized image, whatever we want, the customized image. It goes back to the workstation with the applications on it or whatever we're going to do with these things. ImageX, and I think that we've discussed these things before. We can capture an image, append an image, modify an image, and apply an image. Modify an image, you can mount it and add things to it. So we can't, it is a handy tool. If you take their tests, go through the ImageX steps just to know what they are. Not that you're going to have to make one, at least for me, make one and then apply it, but you can do all of those things. You have to have a WinPE disk in order to do those things that has the ImageX commands on it. Wim format, modify the image, you need to mount it, and once you mount it, you can then make the changes to it. You may want to put drivers on it or whatever else. Applying an image, verify that the target partition is created and has enough disk space to accommodate the image. Big deal here. Apply the image partition. You have to partition it before you apply the image. Should be equal to or greater than the image size so that we can apply this thing to that partition. Initial configuration tasks. You've done that, been there, done that. You're going to get to do that again here in a few minutes. Product activation, again, we're not going to do that because we're not going to keep them that long, but if you're going to activate it, you have to do that, put the license in. Multiple activation keys, MAKs, you'll buy maybe 5 keys or 10 keys or whatever else. And you manually put these keys in, and when you get to 5, 6 won't activate. Key management services, large environments, ECPI. The company runs a key management service, and it's run at Virginia Beach. It's part of Active Directory. It doesn't have to be. You can manually configure it to do that. What happens, since it's part of an Active Directory service, when we install a Windows 7 machine here and join it to Active Directory, it finds that service and gets automatically activated. These things check on a regular basis. So it's not like you can come in here and install Windows 7 on your laptop, figure out what the KMS IP address is and license it, and it'd be good forever. It'd be good for about 30 days. And it says, uh-oh, caught you. And it's going to deactivate it for you. So you do have to be able to keep finding this, but it is, from an enterprise standpoint, you only have to put the license in one time. Microsoft then charges you based on the number of machines that you have installed at any given time. And that's actually the way that ours get activated and get charged. The server license, and I think we talked about this a little bit before, product keys, the collection of keys used, and they talk about that in the machine, the A, B, and the C groups. Type of multi-access or KMS keys required. License provides the right to install an instance of an operating system. So the server license allows us to install the server. It doesn't allow anybody to connect to it. You have to have client access licenses in order to connect to the server and use those resources. And you have to have, depending on how you license it, the number of connections that will permit all of your users to connect, the maximum number that you have. Device-based CALs, license of choice in a situation where many users access resources from a few client computers. This might be one that we had 30 users, but we only used 3 computers. Normally, we're going to license based on the number of users that are going to be connected at any one time to the server. We have 40 employees that use the computer, but only 20 of them are connected at a time, 20 day and 20 night. Then we'd only have to buy 20 licenses. If we had 40 computers that we connected to, or if we use if we have 40 computers, then we'd have to buy 40 licenses. But if we had 4 computers that 10 people use, we would only need 4 licenses because we would license the 4 computers, the 4 devices. Basics of core available in all of those can be installed at initial setup or as an upgrade from a full version of Server 2008 or 3 or 2008. Appropriate for deploying roles that require little or no regular administration. And again, once you get the role installed, you can do remote management. Not remote desktop. Remote management with the tools, because there is a tool set that you can get, the remote administration tools, to install to manage these things with. If you connect with a remote desktop, you get a command prompt. And that may be one of the things to do those things, and that kind of brings okay, so that's what remote desktop really is. It's a remote desktop. It's that desktop connected remotely. The tools allow you to connect to the service and manage the service. You can manage these things remotely. Configuring the server core, set all the configurations through the command prompt. And again, you're going to do that. There is that link that has the commands. The commands, the basic commands that you need are in the book to rename it and to set the IP address. I just want you to set right now, through the first 3 chapters, to rename it based on the standard that's in the book and set an IPv4 IP address. The chapter 3 will do in a minute, goes through some IPv6. The IPv6 theory, we're not going to go through actually configuring the IPv6 addresses yet. Auto configuration, they'll assign themselves an IPv6 address to be able to work within a network, within a room basically here. Net.exe to create a user account, and again, those commands are in the book to create a user account, change password, put an IP address on it, add a user to a group, create groups, all of those sorts of things are available there. Windows Management Instrumentation, the WMIC, Windows Management Instrumentation command, change the server name, modify the domain membership. And there are a couple of commands that are available. The link that's in the Moodle page will give you, I think, all of the basic commands that you need to do the configurations that we're up to. I know we'll do all the configurations that we're up to right now because I did those configurations yesterday using that. And also they're in the book. The net shell net sh command is a very handy one for the core version. And if you get in a net shell, if you question mark, it'll tell you what's available, and then you go to that one and then question mark what's available so that you can actually work your way through. The configuring the IP address, the confusing part to me is you've got to use the NICS name, local area connection. or whatever it is, and there is a command to show which ones are there. What are the names of them if you can't find them? So those things are all available. So the install, modularization, XML-based answer files, and the answer files are not, again, as simple to make as they used to be. Used to be just, I've forgotten the name of the command, but they came up, you made it really quickly, text file, you were done. Now it is a more complex method. And what they say is, if you really want an answer file, find one that works and modify it for your, and they're available, and modify it for your particular circumstance. Install methods, CD, net distribution, image-based, network distribution. PXE is actually a network distribution. So that's the one I want to use for the core install. ImageX allows you to create and manage images using the command line interface. ImageX, again, something you really should be familiar with. Are there other tools that are available? Yeah, this is one that Microsoft uses, though. And there are a lot of commercial tools available for managing Windows that actually use the capability of Windows if you learn how to use the Microsoft tools. Server Core is a new and exciting, I guess at least it's new. But don't forget, once you get the services on, use remote management. Questions? Are you ready to take a break, and then we'll do the last one, then we'll get into the installs.